From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on April 28th, 2025 from South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia. On this episode of The Lede, we have 6 legislative days left in this year's session, and with much to look at, we talk with reporter and friend of the pod, Maayan Schechter, about the Sine Die sprint, something you can follow along with by reading the State House Gavel that I co-author with Maayan and the Russ McKinney. SouthCarolinaPublicRadio.org. But before we get into it, I want to ask you guys again, the Emanuel 9, as you all know, is part of our state's shared history, and 10 years later, after the shooting at Mother Emanuel, their legacy still shapes who we are. That's why SCETV is asking you to take part in Voices Collected. Your voice, your memory, your experience, it matters. Visit scetv.org/Emanuel9 and help us honor the past while building a stronger, more connected South Carolina. Like I've told you guys before, that's kind of like our version of StoryCorps to honor the memory of those who we lost 10 years ago. We also want to hear from you like we always do in our wind down section by giving us a shout in our voicemail box at 803-563-7169. We want to hear from you guys. We have a phone call. We're excited, but we want to stay connected to you. You'll find out more in the wind down with our special guest, Maayan Schechter. 803-563-7169. All right, let's look at what's on tap for this week at the State House. It will be a busy second to last week here in Columbia. Penultimate. I'm hearing the word penultimate. We always love a penultimate use. Again, with committee meetings taking place in both chambers and long floor days expected. Get comfortable shoes on. Pack your snacks. A good attitude would help. Okay, you know who you are. I'm talking about myself. Congress is also back in session after its 2-week recess. And on the economic front, we get national unemployment data on Friday and the first quarter GDP estimate on Wednesday. Data week. But it's almost May, which means it's almost Sine Die, which means session is almost over, which means we have Maayan Schechter here with us to talk about what's happening on some of the biggest bills with just days to go. Maayan, welcome back. You're looking refreshed and ready for the last 2 weeks.
Always good to be here, trying to keep this good attitude going. Mm-hmm. I think there's a shelf life, but we're working on it. We're working on it.
Well, at least we're not in today, like last Monday when we had that special session for that removal of the treasurers. So right. We'll talk about that in a moment. But last week, the Senate got done with its version of the budget. We mentioned some of the highlights in the budget in the previous pod, but were there any really big differences between the Senate and the House versions that you think will provide for some differences, some issues when lawmakers have their conference committee later next month?
I think the first big notable difference is really spending. The House's budget worked out to be about $14.6 billion, and the Senate's is somewhere in the $14.4 billion range. So that means that there is a lot of spending that they're going to have to try to work out in conference committee. The state newspapers, Joe Bustos, has done some reporting on why that is. To name a few examples, there's difference between tuition mitigation dollars, keeping in-state tuition low essentially for college students. So that's in both budgets, but those differences are going to need to be worked out. Money for bridges, the Senate put in less, about $100 million, and the House budget put in about $200 million. School resource officers, that's one of the governor's big asks for the year. The Senate put in millions of dollars to hire more SROs. The House put in less. So there are a lot of differences to go around in this budget year compared to previous iterations, compared to past years, and including in provisos, those one-year laws that are attached to the budget, and we'll talk about one coming up. But one big agreement, which is really huge, and I'm sure you've mentioned this too, is no earmarks, no pet projects or local investments. Pork, right. So that is a big deal this year. It's caused a lot of headaches, some not so happy lawmakers, but that is a big shift in the state budget this year.
And that's a big trade-off for the whole tax reduction, too. I've always thought that was like the offset there for how they could get the money for the lowering the tax income rate.
And that's one thing that Senate Finance Chairman Harvey Peeler has talked about. I do think, though, it also has alleviated some of this headache between the chambers, who gets what money, how much money, et cetera. But yes, I mean, that is what Peeler has said, which is it helps offset some of the money that they want to put aside for income tax reform or change or cut or shift, whatever you want to call it.
And the budget, I mean, those provisos, well, those earmarks, we should say, they always seem like they would also be the target of some vetoes by the governor, too, which would make for some tricky moves for lawmakers if they want to overturn them or vote against them.
There were some provisos that the governor vetoed, and those were pretty much sustained by the legislature. They didn't return to deal with them. But overall, the governor hasn't necessarily vetoed all of the earmarks. He's, of course, wanted some grant-like program. There are members of the legislature that are interested in that as well. One idea that was floated around is sending almost like a grant block of dollars to each delegation. They can kind of decide how to distribute it. But you get into the whole issue, the whole argument over from lawmakers, should we be the ones in charge of spending that money, or should, quote unquote, the bureaucrats, people that work at these state agencies, should they be the ones in charge? And so if earmarks do return, and I'm not sure if I would buy that they are completely dead, that will be an argument there.
Yeah, look at Congress.
Right.
But Maayan, we're still waiting to get final revenue numbers next month. So maybe we can shake the money tree, as it's always called, and see what falls out. I mean, I'm guessing that's going to be a key factor, too, when it comes to budget negotiations with that conference committee, too, and how that money can be used.
Oh, of course. More money, more problems,
always.
As they say. But yeah, the House will take the second crack at The House will take its second crack at the budget, I think, next week. And then, of course, conference committee. So the process is far from over.
And also there was that move in the Senate to raise in-district per diem for lawmakers. It's a bit wonky, a bit insidery, but that's something that's been really overdue for decades, it seems like, too.
Yeah, many lawmakers would say that. So in addition to what lawmakers get per year in their salary and then per diem and retirement, they also get this taxable in-district pay that is $1,000 per month. The Senate added a proviso to raise that amount to $2,500. So that's a roughly $3 million cost or so. And it's supposed to go to, obviously, in-district expenses, office supplies, staff, et cetera. Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey was talking to reporters last week. He did not vote for this proviso, but he did put it a little bit into context. He was saying that senators' districts are so large, so many constituents. And of course, while this is a technically part-time legislature, lawmakers pretty much work full-time.
Yeah.
And senators can blow through that $1,000 very, very quickly. He didn't like the process of how it all went down. So I do think that this could potentially be a proviso that sticks. It's not an exorbitant amount. Obviously, it is more. But a lot of lawmakers, like you said, they will argue it has been a long time coming to do something like this.
Also, a big issue was the massive Education Scholarship Trust Fund Bill, S62. Remember, we kicked off session with that. The Senate came out of the gates swinging with that. That's the voucher bill that's back in the Senate, but it kind of fizzled last Thursday because they lost a quorum. We were talking about that. Kind of an odd time, but of course that was scheduling. But despite this, there's still some amendments floating around, even though that bill seems pretty sealed up because it's a compromise bill at this point.
I think so. Senate Education Chair Greg Hembury and House Education Chairwoman Shannon Erickson negotiated a deal. They bypassed the typical conference committee process. The vouchers or scholarships would get paid through the state budget. The big difference, and there's some other things like eligibility and then obviously household income. The big thing about this negotiated compromise, which is something that the House put in, is putting in a third-party trustee, someone to oversee the program. They think this is a workaround, or as Senator Hembury put it, an insurance policy, since the state Supreme Court, of course, ruled a previous law similar unconstitutional. Obviously, there's going to be a lawsuit filed over this law once it reaches the governor's desk and is signed. State Supreme Court will have to take it up again. But yes, going back to your initial question, this is pretty much locked down. Senator Hembury said as much on the floor that he worked out this compromise in a good faith effort and doesn't want to make any changes to it. That way, they can pass it out. It goes back over to the House. The House can agree to it and it goes to the governor's desk much faster. Again, with 6 days left.
Yeah, and it wasn't too long ago that we had that major tax reform rollout press conference. Another big issue talking about taxes this year. And that was in the State House lobby. You had the House, you had the Senate, you had the governor, you had other people out there really, beating their chest, talking about how we're going to reform taxes and lower taxes. But that seemed to fizzle out once we got the economic impact of what those taxes would be and how they'd have to go up before they went down, You got to get down. Does the movement still have life, or will this just be kind of like something as part of the budget at this point in terms of reducing the tax to 6%?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big chunk will be in the budget this year. This is a really important week for committee process for bills. Essentially, if a bill does not make it out of committee this week and onto the floor, it's not going to pass.
We'll see you next year.
Right. See you next year. First year of a 2-year session, so there's still life. And Senate Budget Chairman Harvey Peeler told reporters that the Senate was not going to move on an income tax plan from the House this year. That if the House wants to do it, they can do it. Senate is not touching it.
It's a big lift.
It's a big lift. I was looking at the House meeting schedule this week. There is not a Ways and Means Committee meeting or a subcommittee. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't get scheduled in between us talking about this, but that's not a good sign if the House is going to have a plan. Last week, the House Ways and Means Committee did have a meeting where they heard from Frank Rainwater from Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office. He presented some perhaps more attractive proposals. I think probably the respective caucuses are talking about those proposals, trying to see which one they like better. But there was clearly one that was more of a, quote, progressive tax that wouldn't have as large of an impact. That seems to be the likeliest of likely proposals that the House would take up. But no, this year it's through the budget. It's not going to be its standalone version.
It's so much to deal with in, again, 6 days. And, of course, another bill that's kind of facing that same fate is the anti-DEI bill that passed out of the House along party lines and has been assigned to the Judiciary Committee on April 10th. No hearings are scheduled this week in the Senate Judiciary. So anti-DEI appears to be DEAD for this year.
Yeah, unless something gets attached to the budget, perhaps. But again, going back to the comment I made about committee work, if there's not a committee, and so far I did not see a subcommittee that was taking up the DEI bill, did not see a full committee taking it up either, that doesn't spell good things for that bill becoming law this year.
Exactly. So we'll have a pretty clear vision of what we can expect by the end of this week, based on what we've seen on committee work this week, and also based on what they're doing on the House floor this week and the Senate floor this week. But also, if you don't see a bill that you've been following in committee and it hasn't moved from another chamber to the other one, like, Sine Die there.
Yeah, this has been kind of an odd session. There's just not a lot of bills that have really come out. I mean, obviously ratifications were kind of slow, so we do have a new chunk of bills before the governor to sign into law. But yeah.
With the inability to do conference committees after Sine Die, right? So, that was a big thing that's really kind of stopping a lot of these bills from getting to that point in some sense.
Right. Lawmakers did not want to be here past Sine Die, with the exception of the budget. And they clearly wrote the Sine Die resolution to ensure that, which, is a good way for them to point at lawmakers and say, sorry, we have this. We can't do it. Now, we could amend it, but we're probably not. So,
like when we got rid of crossover. But wrapping up, Maayan, talking about tort reform, a phrase that we love to say all session long, but it's been kind of quiet recently. What's the latest on tort reform? And do we expect it to actually pass? Remember, there's so much momentum. 4 weeks in the Senate spent debating that. The House passed their own version of just a liquor liability bill, which is at the center of so much of this that everyone's worried about. A lot of business owners are dealing with these insurance premiums because of liquor liability issues, but everything's kind of just frozen.
I would put tort reform, liquor liability, and the energy bill not in necessarily the same pots, but equal as in priority. So lawmakers from both the House and the Senate see those two bills as being the top two things they have got to get done this year. And obviously, as you mentioned, the liquor liability piece is probably the most pressing because bars and restaurants have been so aggressive about how without it, that could effectively shut their doors permanently. Talking to lawmakers, talking to leaders, they are still very much having some type of communication over both of those bills. Will they go to a conference committee, a quick conference committee within the next few days? Perhaps. We have not seen for either one of those bills an actual agreement. So time is winding down. But I do think, given the governor is going to put probably increased pressure on lawmakers, bars and restaurants are putting increased pressure on them. Lawmakers know that they have to do something.
Without the House liquor liability bill passed unanimously, broad. I mean, everyone all in on it. Like, they moved it. Like, that is so rare, especially for something so complicated. But of course, the Senate version of the bill is way more complicated. Omnibus versus just the specific one dealing with liquor liability and trying to get those insurance premiums lower and get more insurance companies and carriers in the state for these businesses.
Yeah, and I don't want to say never in this business because that would be not smart. However, Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey has been so clear that he is not going to let just a narrow liquor liability move through by itself, that it needs to incorporate some of what the tort reform bill includes. And so that's where this becomes a bit of an interesting tug of war.
Yeah, 6 days. And with that being said, my last question, any word yet from the House with what to do with embattled Treasurer Curtis Loftus, who we just saw the Senate vote 33-8 to remove him? That's more than 2/3 that they need to do that. The ball's now in the House's court, and ... 6 days, 2 weeks.
Yeah, we haven't gotten any official word from the House, even though we've been sort of given hints that we would get something soon. I would say all arrows are pointing in the direction of no, they're not going to do anything on the treasurer. I do not get the sense that there is a lot of, I don't want to use the word excitement, but we don't see that type of energy like we did in the Senate. So again, not going to say never, but taking a few steps back and kind of looking at all the factors here, the calendar, the fact that, the House is up for re-election next year with the treasurer, and so many other things at play. All arrows to me point that they are highly, highly, highly unlikely at this point to move forward on anything.
And if you want to know what is happening at the State House in these final days, you can always read the State House Gavel, southcarolinapublicradio.org. Maayan really does the yeoman's work for that.
Do I have gray hair yet?
Check it out there on southcarolinapublicradio.org. Maayan, thank you as always.
As always, thank you, Gavin. And AT.
Welcome to the wind down section, our little break from the news. We're glad you're here, along with A.T. Shire, lead podcast producer, and Maayan Schechter.
Maayan Schechter.
Maayan Schechter. I was so excited.
Where's Miss Schechter at?
I was so excited to say friend of the pod that I just threw an N in there.
Where's
Miss
Schechter been?
She changed. It's a different personality from the pod to the wind down. But thank you for staying, Maayan. Yes, thank you.
Of course.
We also want to give a shout out, Gavin.
Yes.
We forgot last week. It was little baby Rena's first birthday this weekend.
Happy first birthday, baby Rena.
We got to give a shout out to the number one baby on this podcast.
She's we don't put her in the credits, but she is actually the executive.
She's executive. She's supervising producer.
She's been running beverages out.
She owns the pod.
That's right.
I hate to admit this, but she actually controls the pod.
Yeah, it's a weird thing where she got emancipated from me and somehow stole the rights from Gavin and his family. But I was
my father's legacy.
Exactly, and she's stolen it, and good on her. I mean, real gumption from that kid. But I've been on this horse for a while, and I don't want to beat a dead horse too much. But just going through it, I'm going to redouble my efforts here.
Yes.
Is that we should abolish first birthdays. It is not fun for anybody, and Rena. She hated it. She
had some compounding factors, though. She wasn't really in the best mood.
No, she wasn't in the best mood, but
she doesn't know what's going on.
When you have a baby not in the best mood, maybe the best idea isn't to use her as a prop for your own enjoyment. But you live and you learn, you know what I mean?
Oh, come here, I want to see that baby.
Yeah. Oh, I really want to take a picture with her. Why isn't she smiling? Oh, she's not feeling well. Okay, great. Speaking about feeling well, one way that's going to make me feel well is getting to this call, Gavin. Okay, Maayan, are you ready?
I'm prepared.
Okay,
and ready.
there we go. Here we go. Call.
Hey guys, it's Brandy from Pickens County calling back in again, doing my part. Honestly, I've hesitated calling because I've been really weary, just everything going on in the world. Easy to get bogged down, but like I saw on a bumper sticker, I liked it a lot. It said, "The horrors persist, yet I remain silly." So, calling with some levity. I've been hearing you guys talking about, golf and the Masters and all that, cool things that I have zero concept for. So I wanted to ask if you have experience in a different type of cultural experience, something that happened locally up here recently, and that is Comic-Con. So the South Carolina Comic-Con was at the beginning of April. Unfortunately, I didn't go this year. It's just too much for my little kids, for my young children. Maybe in a few years we'll all go. We do other things. But for a local convention, it's awesome. To be able to pull in special guests like Charles Martinet and Tara Strong, people like that. Just a really neat event, and seeing the cosplay is always amazing. Anybody who missed it this year, there's other cool events happening. July, I think, is the Southeast Gaming Exchange, also in Greenville. And then in the fall, a Ren Fair is always good, so the Upstate Ren Fair is always fun. But yeah, I do wonder if you guys have ever, what your experience is with nerd culture and events like that. If you've never checked it out, I really, really invite you to. It's just such a cool experience. Very different from the Masters, one would suppose. But yeah, hopefully we'll be going to the Gaming Exchange ourselves this summer. My kids liked that last year. Also, finally became a sustaining star, so should have done that a long time ago, but finally did it this year. I've got to support public radio, and my kids were very excited that we are now supporting PBS Kids with Daniel Tiger and Carl the Collector. Keep up the good work. Really, truly appreciate all the work that you guys do. Bye.
Brandy, thank you as always for calling. That was wonderful. What a wonderful voicemail from you. And thank you for becoming a sustaining star. Thank you. Period. Thank you.
Period.
I want more people to donate right now. 800-256-8535.
He's got that number on lock right there. Really
There's
good
so many
stuff.
phone numbers in my head.
Really good.
But Brandy, you jogged our memory. We need to go to a Renaissance
We would
fair.
love to be at a Ren
Ye
Fair.
old lead pod.
I think that would be hilarious to record a politics podcast at a Ren Fair. But I have seen that you do get there's a name for it. I don't remember what it is. But to take people out of their experience of Ren Fairing is frowned upon.
Oh, okay.
So we would have to hide the mics.
What is this instrument from the future?
Exactly right. So we would. I'm sure there's a way to do it. Maybe we could disguise it as turkey legs or something like that.
Just put a small lav in something, a flute.
Exactly. We could be traveling minstrels of sorts.
I'm loving this.
I already have outfits in my mind.
Oh, yeah.
We could easily do
but
that.
as far as nerd fandoms go, I think I'm pretty on the record as being an absolute Lord of the Rings loser.
Yes.
I have numerous swords. I love the siege weapons and the songs. I know many dwarves' names.
It's all Rena's inheritance right here.
Yes. My father-in-law, who's in town for Rena's birthday, said, do you guys have any gold? And I said, the only thing we have is Lord of the Rings toys from the early 2000s. Maayan, you are not a nerd, but you have been to one of these conventions.
I have been to Dragon Con as an Atlanta native. Dragon Con was a huge thing.
It's a deal, yeah.
And I don't actually know if I intentionally went to Dragon Con because I was just downtown and I just kind of followed a path. And next thing
that
I know,
seems like you. That's your style. Yeah. You
next
see a group, you're going.
Yeah. Next thing I know, I'm seeing all the cosplayers. I'm seeing things I've never seen before.
Yes.
Smelling things you've never smelled before.
The smell is something that, it's important.
Hard to quantify.
It was really interesting. I have not gone back since, but it was such a big affair. I felt
it.
I felt like it was a big
cosplay.
party.
I always feel like I see some random stuff on Instagram or something like that where someone's dressed up like the group from The Fifth Element or something like that. They nailed it. They nailed it, that would be kind of fun to see.
That's a great costume movie, though, because I think a very fancy fashion guy made that. Yeah.
John Paul Gaultier.
And then all the background characters that you see with chiseled facial features, those are actually all runway models.
That's
from
right.
his collection. I think I sent you that the other day. Yeah. So.
Maayan, how deep into fantasy do you get? Are you just scratching the surface barely, or have you ever seen a trilogy? Can you make it through one?
I have seen. Hang on a second.
Yeah.
I have seen Lord of the Rings. Oh. Have I seen it in full? No.
Okay. Hard. That's
but let me tell you this. I'm gonna tick off my husband probably. In order to concentrate on work sometimes.
Yeah.
He will play Lord of the Rings, kind of the music.
He'll play the Howard Shore scores. They're amazing.
It's or the lo-fi or whatever it is.
I don't.
It's kind of I feel I walk home sometimes and
Study
I'm like,
vibes.
Yes, I walk inside. I'm like, what other planet have I arrived?
Ethereal realm have I entered into?
So
Is it majestic though when you walk in? Do you feel, or is it? I guess
I
if
feel
it's the
more
lo-fi
like
version,
serene.
okay.
Like I feel like, so I've seen the scenes of the, what are they called? The
Hobbits,
the
short ones.
The Hobbits.
Yeah.
And it's like a Hobbit land, you know?
The Shire.
So, the Shire. So
Does it feel like a coffee shop too? And then he like makes you make a latte, and then you're like,
She gets your name
latte,
wrong.
sir."
that's right. Right. He spells my name wrong.
Yeah.
It's always M-A-Y.
Keep up the good work.
Right. Slay all day.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
Yeah, they got a whole thing.
If you sit down and really put your time towards Lord of the Rings, if you sit down and tell yourself ahead of time, I'm going to watch these movies, I'm going to pay attention and take the whole thing in, you will cry at the end. It's
know what?
impossible to make it through and not.
The gavel can wait.
Thank
Oh,
you.
you heard it here first,
You
folks.
heard it here first,
Yeah,
folks.
can
Yep.
wait.
Sorry.
Thank you
We're
so
taking a
much.
sabbatical in the last 2 weeks.
Brandy, thank
Is
you
there
so
anything
much
going
for
on?
calling.
We're focusing on
The best callers, please.
Yeah, that was great. Give us a
find
shout, folks. We want to
but
hear.
Maayan,
more.
you said you have one more piece of business at the very end here that had something to do with me, but I don't know quite what it is.
I wanted to formally apologize to you, AT.
Oh, okay.
On air.
For what?
For what?
I have
For what?
not sent you a thank you wedding card.
Oh, yeah, that is okay.
And I have struggled. Every time I see you at work, I'm like,
Every day, yeah.
been harboring
I've
this.
got this thank you card sitting on my desk. And I could just write it here and give it to you, but
Yeah.
it's not the same.
Got to put it in the mail.
Right.
I don't
so,
need it postmarked. It's
Nope.
okay.
Start
Okay.
it
You know
in the
what?
mail.
I'm going to alleviate all feelings of inadequacy in any way.
Beautiful.
I'll say, you know what? Shred it. Shred the card. Put it in the garbage.
Write it for me, but then
Shred it.
Yes.
I don't care, but document it, please. I do need it just for posterity.
Hey, AT, that's what I think of your thank you.
Yeah, that's great. We are free. You're free
You're
at last.
absolved.
Yeah,
It's
it's
safe.
okay. I do not
This
care.
is a giant weight lifted off
The
of my
lead says
shoulders.
you're safe.
It's the only reason she came on this
That's
show
right.
today.
She felt indebted.
The
That's why
immense,
she
the
came on.
immense guilt I've had just seeing you every day.
I think that the thank you card industrial complex is one of the biggest wastes of
Big
time.
paper.
Big.
You're going after
big
big paper right now?
I
Big
can
thanks.
smell it on the way to
The big thanks.
Charleston.
This girl's from Atlanta. She knows Georgia International. She's
It's
pushing big
it's
paper.
pointless. I don't think it's important. And if you feel like you are owed a thank you card, I think you need a hobby.
I do
okay?
like the surprise of a thank you card. It is nice.
what's
but then it
surprise?
always, when I read it, I'm like, oh, this feels.
but what happens when it's a thank you card and it just says like it's already been written by a company and then
Yeah.
it says like thanks
Yes.
Gavin.
Thinking of you. When I read this, I thought of you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Like,
I tried
no.
to add a little pizzazz into every one of my cards, but then my handwriting gets worse and worse
and worse. Yeah,
because my hand starts.
It's not
you know.
fair.
And it takes a piece of your soul
It
every
should.
time.
It could be an email. I didn't get Rena a card, so maybe she'll hold that against.
She got a podcast. What more does she need?
She'll hold that against me. But anyway, Gavin, we gotta close it.
Yes,
take
give
us
us a
away.
shout. Thank you for everyone being on the podcast, and thank you, Brandy, for calling. Give us a shout, weigh in, like with what Brandy was talking about. We want to hear you guys talk about your fandoms, and maybe you've been to a Ren Fair. Maybe we're gonna go do that one of these days. Let us know 803-563-7169. We want to give you time to talk on the pod. If you don't want to call us, maybe leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love that too. And you can stay up to date with the latest news on scetv.org and southcarolinapublicradio.org. And don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lede is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producers, AT and Rena Schechter. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lead, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina. I'm an amateur archaeologist. Yeah, okay. Oh my God, I was on a dig over the weekend.
Dude, I found so many relics.
500-piece Steve Urkel jigsaw puzzle that he risked his life for. It was beautiful.